Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing a top 10 best secondaries list in Warframe, and this is actually going to include both incarnans and non-incarnan pistols. Now, why am I doing this differently than my primaries video? Well, one, I'm doing 10 in one, and also, the non-incarnan secondaries in this game are honestly just some of the best weapons in general, and they compete pretty well with their incarnan counterparts, so mixing them together did not feel like I was doing a disservice to anything. You could honestly reference this video as just a best weapons in the game video because most of these secondaries are better than most primaries if I'm being honest. Some housekeeping before we start is that I will be using no Warframe buffs of any kind in this video except for Arcane Velocity, which just gives fire rate, and then a companion which will have Tenacious and Reinforced Bond active, both of which just grant 60% more fire rate and 1.2x more critical damage. They may prime some enemies for me, but this will be the weapons performing entirely on their own merit, not using anything crazy like Nourish or Zadis here. Number 1 on this list is the Akikor, and I would be surprised if you were not already familiar with this weapon. It got over 4.2 billion kills in 2024, and is definitely probably the most used secondary at this point for a good reason. And that is why I decided to have it at number 1 on this list. But let's go over the basic functionality. It is a beam weapon, and if you didn't know, beams are beams are definitely the strongest weapon type in the game. But it has a very unique trait where on getting a kill, you will generate a tendril launching out from the gun that will automatically target enemies that are within 40 meters of your reticle, without even needing to shoot them. If I stack up my beam some more, you will see that you can have up to 4 of these active at once, meaning that with the main beam counted, you can shoot up to 5 enemies just for looking at one of them. Isn't that ridiculous? But the problem here is that when the gun needs to reload, you lose the additional tendrils, and with only a 60 magazine, well, you need to reload quite often. But the main reason the Akikor became one of the best secondaries last year is because of its exclusive mod, Sentient Surge. Sentient Surge states that each target eliminated will refill 20% of Akikor's magazine, status chance and critical chance are then increased by 60% for each tendril active, which is 4, meaning that you will have a 240% bonus to both of those stats. This means that the weapon will automatically reload itself and allow you to infinitely keep the tendrils active, as long as you continue to get kills, which as you can see, obviously isn't really that much of a problem for the Akikor. This is one of the best weapons in the game. You practically can act like a mini Zaku. In terms of how to build it, seeing as it is a beam weapon, obviously we want a lot of multi-shot here. If you didn't know, multi-shot will double dip on status damage and multiply your status chance, which is incredibly powerful, and this interaction only happens on beam weapons. It is another reason why we have Lethal Torrent here. The lack of a critical chance mod is because Sentient Surge adds 240% of it, which is a lot higher than any other bonus we could get. Viral and Heat is the best elemental combo. You have incredibly high status chance that is multiplied by our multi-shot, so you trigger max viral very quickly alongside Puncture, which adds even more base critical chance, and then Heat is a fantastic DOT, prime target cracker to take advantage of the increased critical chance we have from Sentient Surge. Cascadia Flare gives a much higher damage bonus than any of the primary arcanes, which we trigger easily from primed Heat to charge, and then Ruinous Extension just makes the weapon feel a lot better because it gives it an extra 8 meters of range. Galvanized Shot also giving us even more base damage because we have 4 statuses innately here, not counting for any we might add on with our Warframe or through any external priming. One thing to note is that Target Cracker can actually be swapped out for either an Expel mod or Pistol Elementalist if you are running any external sources of critical damage. This is because the weapon will self-increase its critical chance by 25% due to Puncture, which is what makes Prime Target Cracker 3% better than Expel, but if you do have any external critical damage, then either of those mods will be better here. Akikor is easily one of the best weapons in the game. I love this pistol. I use it all the time. I couldn't really think of something that is as good for just running through and exterminate and not even needing to aim at every enemy and just killing them all. Definitely pick this one up right now. Next up we have the Latum, and while this is the first Incarnate weapon on this tier list, it definitely won't be the last, but you could make a solid argument for this being the best of all of them. And as a Gen 1 Incarnate, it does have 5 evolutions, well technically 4 while the others have 3, but these 5th evolution perks of Overwhelming or Devouring Attrition are just what break this weapon. Let me show you. The base fire is really honestly just a simple pistol. I mean, you know, you can clearly see right now that even with almost no stacks, it's already like absurdly broken. So definitely nothing to scoff at here, but activating the Incarnate form, and you now have what is essentially an Exceltra, except if it was actually good. Even Eximus heavy gunners won't actually be able to do anything against this weapon. It is that strong. And you know, easy orange red crit build right here. But this is actually only one of 2 ways to play this weapon. If I swap us from Overwhelming Attrition to Devouring, and then change our build over to our non-crit setup, even resummoning these Eximus, and you can see the weapon is still clearly a demon. Now before I get to the builds, the math behind this shows that Overwhelming Attrition is stronger on average if you want to be more precise and aim at enemies' heads, especially if you have any external critical chance or using Zada's Whisper. But if you want a more chill build that doesn't require you to hit headshots all of the time, then the one with Devouring Attrition is definitely your go-to. And seeing as, like the Fenmore, this one is based on not hitting crits, you definitely want to take your 4th evolution and reduce your critical chance down to 12% while also increasing your status chance. Your other ones are pretty much up to your personal choice. I just like this one because reload speed will scale the Incarnate transformation time, and then less recoil on this already very high kick gun is just very nice. When building it, we obviously don't want any sort of critical stats here because we won't benefit from them, so we just build for a ton of base damage, a lot of elements, a lot of multi-shot, and elemental damage to get a very high amount of raw damage that will then multiply with the 2000% additional damage from Devouring Attrition, which if you didn't know, is actually multiplicative with base damage. Secondary Fortifier in the Arcane slot just means that we can take down Eximus units that much quicker while also giving us Overguard in turn. You could definitely run something like Cascadia Flare here, but I don't think you really need the extra damage. If you want to build the weapon to crit, swap over to Overwhelming Attrition and change this over to plus 50% headshot damage. This is why I say this is a headshot focused build. We are using Secondary Enervate here to get all of our critical chance. And then the rest of the build is the standard, you know, Prime Target Cracker, Lethal Torrent, Magnetic Might, and Accelerated Isotope. You don't want to use Galvanized Shot on either of these builds because the weapon is mostly AoE, and AoEs do not benefit from Gaptitude, so it will be worthless. But Heat and Corrosive is a great raw damage setup here, and makes the Latum just one of the best weapons in the game. I've used this pistol for a very long time. If you can get it early on once you've done the New War, it will low-key just carry you through the rest of the game. But again, use the non-crit one if you don't want to, you know, be precise and aim at heads and you just want to like spray like this. It will be a bit more effective on average. Up next is actually one of our first utility weapons in the Epitaph Prime, and while this gun can deal insane amounts of damage, the main reason that you and most people are going to end up using this one is for priming. Now, priming in Warframe is the act of applying statuses to enemies, like these guys, to then use another weapon to now benefit from condition or gun condition overload, so you deal a lot more damage, and also, you know, Viral will give them a damage multiplier, you proc heat that will armor strip them, cold increases critical damage. It's just a very powerful mechanic, and the Epitaph is the easiest and probably best primer to do it in the game. There are a couple reasons behind that, but I'd say the main few are that the weapon is massively AoE. Like, look at how big that radius is. I actually don't think the visuals are indicative of just how large it is. Just one shot, and I just primed this entire group of enemies. It also doesn't need to reload. If you look in the bottom right, it doesn't have a magazine, and actually just picking up more ammo will just, bring it back up to 40. But you can swap to this thing whenever and just, shoot a couple times, and boom, there you go. While it is not listed in the unique trait, the weapon also force procs cold, which is one element that we don't have to mod for when looking at the gun, and cold is a great status for the crowd control and also critical damage increase. But the weapon here is built entirely for status, with some QOL coming from amalgam barrel diffusion, and then prime fulmination is a necessary blast radius increase so you can prime much bigger areas with a single shot. On this particular build right here, we build for viral, radiation, magnetic, and heat, which is accompanied by the weapon's innate blast and also the cold mentioned earlier. That allows us to get 6 statuses on an enemy in a single shot, which is a lot more damage from condition overload or condition overload. But some Warframe builds do require you to have auger mods equipped on your weapon, and if you are using one of those, then swap over to this setup. You do lose 2 elements in heat and magnetic, as they are replaced by auger seeker and auger pact. If you only need one, then definitely bring on the magnetic mod again. And also remember that if you don't need secondary dexterity for your melee build, you can easily put on secondary encumber, which gives status effects a 24% chance to trigger a second random one, and will actually allow this epitaph to trigger every elemental status in the game, which is super broken. Next up, we have the dual toxicist Incarnon, and this is one of the more interesting Incarnons because even if we ignore it, the base form has a unique trait called Frenzy, where headshots grant you 150% more fire rate, 100% ammo efficiency, and a 100% toxin damage bonus, which acts like a 9th mod. What's unique here is that 150% fire rate is actually multiplicative to other fire rate sources, so now that I've triggered it, you can see the gun shoots way faster than, just a 150% bonus would actually give. But bringing it into Incarnate form, and we get increased stats in pretty much every area, like damage, critical chance, critical damage, and also fire rate. So the gun now shoots, this fast, which is ridiculous. Well, you'll notice that now, any shots that I make at an enemy will ricochet to the closest enemy's head. Boom, you can see that it just domed her in the head right there. And this has 2 uses. One, it means you don't need to aim at heads to actually benefit from headshot damage bonuses, and it also allows you to easily trigger the frenzy buff. As you can see right now, I just triggered it, but I'm not even aiming at this guy's head. But also, if you have punch through modded on the weapon, you actually generate an additional ricochet for every enemy that the one bullet hits by punch through, meaning that if I shoot through these 4, they just kind of clear everything out near them as they have a 5-meter range. These additional ricochets are also generated by multi-shot, so you generate just a ton of them with a single trigger pull. And if you build the weapon for raw damage, it is, I don't know, I'd argue probably the best crowd clear weapon in the game just because of the damage that this thing puts out. Like, look at this. Let me bring in some Eximus here and see if they can handle it. I'm going to give you a spoiler warning. They cannot. Yeah, they fall over like wet paper too. One of the strongest Incarnons in the game. And modding it is actually pretty unique because that additional toxin that Frenzy gives you, like I said, it acts like a mod. So to get viral, we only have to use Deep Freeze because when we get into Incarnon form, or even just the base form, it will combine with the toxin for viral. All 3 galvanized mods are used here. Crosshairs is super easily triggerable because the ricochets will auto aim for heads, and the same goes for our secondary deadhead. Our punch through comes from Merciless Gunfight, which does add additional critical damage, which does make it a little bit better than Seeker, because even though it gives more punch through, crit damage is obviously great. The weapon has a 7.6 times multiplier. Galvanized Shot gives us a lot more base damage to combine with secondary deadhead. Prime Pistol Gambit is even more critical chance. Lethal Torrent for fire rate and multi-shot. It is just an absurdly strong weapon that just deals a ton of damage, and even for single target DPS, this is actually the weapon that I use to kill Archons super easily, because, it charges super quickly, and evolutions wise, I do choose the base critical chance increase of 20%, a minus 50% weapon recoil, and then this one actually gives you up to 100% more multi-shot just for casting abilities, and no, it does not decay. So, if you cast 20 times in a mission, boom, 100% more multi-shot, which is like the best damage buff we could ask for from an evolution like this. Maybe you can take it, I put it down. Back on over to the utility weapons, and we have the Grimoire. Now, this thing is terrible for damage, but the one benefit and reason you would want to use this thing, I don't even know why I have this config on here, I don't ever use this thing for DPS, is because of its unique mod set, the Canticle, and the Invocation mods. The Grimoire has an alt fire, and I will actually show it to you right now. If you look in the top right, you will see that now I have a 60% strength bonus just for using the alt fire. Sure, it only lasts for 20 seconds after the, thing triggering it, the alt fire does go away. But what you can use this for is to snapshot that 60% strength for any ability that you might want. I can think of a couple frames who would really appreciate this, like Jade or Araxia when they go into their 4. Typically, you don't leave their 4 for as long as possible, so getting 60% more strength just for doing the alt fire with Grimoire is really good. One important note is that the 60% strength one is actually the only invocation that can be snapshotted. No, the efficiency and duration ones do not get snapshot for whatever reason. And then Zada invocation is really good for energy generation, granting you 200 energy over the 20 seconds that it is active. I just don't really want to build my Warframe around needing to do this every 20 seconds, so I don't use it. And the Canticle mods can actually be triggered by getting ability kills as long as you have hit them with the Grimoire. So you could play like a sort of primer build and then use the Canticles so that, priming an enemy for heat and then using like Proteus Blaze Artillery will have a 12% chance to drop a universal health orb, or it will armor strip enemies within affinity radius. It's not a bad setup, but the Grimoire just, you really only use it for these. We're kind of ping-ponging here between utility and damage, and the Lex Prime is one of the highest damage secondaries in the game. Now, earlier I said that the, base Latum just felt like a pistol, and this is literally just, like a pistol. Just absurdly simple. But that is only the base form. If I bring the weapon into Incarnate form, it will now shoot what I could most accurately call a TV screen at enemies. This projectile is huge, and once you get your damage stacked up with this gun, well, let me tell you, with some stacks now achieved, even the base fire has become absurdly strong. We're bringing it into Incarnate, and yeah, this projectile has infinite body punch through 2, which means you will just look at a big crowd of enemies, like this battle group right here, and just obliterate them. We used to build this weapon for Slash because it does actually have forced impact on this projectile, but ever since the armor and HP changes, just a viral heat build is, statistically better, and I'm starting to hit my red crits because I'm getting my galvanized crosshair stacks. This is just a super fun gun that, you just aim in the general direction of enemies' heads, and due to the immense size of the projectile, it will automatically hit them for you. And it just clears through everything super easily. This is how I personally build a weapon. Maximum headshot damage. This should be primed heated charge, but I just do not have the forma to, put another slot on here. Literally, I actually have, 0 forma. Tough times out here, y'all. But if you do not want to hit headshots, then you can just swap out crosshairs and deadhead for flare, and then, any mod that you want here, like a Bane mod, more base damage. It's really up to you, but this is my preferred way of playing. I love this gun. I wish it wasn't as underrated as I believe it is, because most people just, are like, Lex Incarnate, when it's genuinely one of the highest damage secondaries in a single shot in the game right now. The only downside is that its base fire rate of 1.07 is absurdly slow, so you have to use this gun with arcane velocity, but what pistol do you not want to use with velocity these days? Compressa is one of the only guns that I have for us today which has 2 builds, one for damage and one for priming. The reason being that the damage build is honestly just really cool. Yeah, this is a pretty, goofy looking damage build, but remember that these are Steel Path level 185 enemies right here. So this is some respectable DPS that we're putting out with the Compressa of all weapons. Now, what's happening here is that the Compressa is being combined with the Blast status and then secondary Enervate to give us really easy critical chance, because Blast has an odd interaction with Enervate where it will trigger it and actually allow us to build up to those super high critical chance bonuses and then red crit with them. This is just a very unique damage build that you can use. It's not what I'm going to use the gun for most of the time, because it really is just a great priming weapon. Let me throw lethal momentum on there. The weapon has innate viral, which means you can actually do the coveted viral and corrosive build here, which is one of the most broken broken elemental priming combinations, and then we also run magnetic and accelerated isotope for the radiation and magnetic, frostbite giving us some more cold. The weapon shoots these like bubbles which have a delayed explosion time, and that is actually useful on a very particular amount of builds, specifically my Neja from a couple of weeks ago. But you know, you just trigger just an absurd amount of statuses, like you're capping on every enemy just for shooting a couple bubbles at them. It's not as fast or as, you know, easy to use as the epitaph because it does have to reload, and that stuff is all very annoying. But it's definitely a better primer if you're doing any sort of single target DPS, because having innate viral just cannot be beat in this game. So if you want a Mimi damage build, you can use it with the Enervate and Blast setup, or you know, you can just run it as a primer. I'm going to do the gameplay of it with the Enervate and Blast build just because, you know what a primer looks like at this point from the Epitaph showcase. But yeah, both of them are really good on this gun. Kuva Nukor is another weapon you would expect to be purely utility here, but this has actually become one of the best damage beam weapons in the game because of secondary Enervate. And that is because this gun has a very, very high critical multiplier, but absolutely abysmal critical chance. Yet Enervate, providing flat CC, just completely ignores that. And when set up correctly, Nukor being an absolutely broken like beam damage weapon, I would never have guessed would have been possible. But you know, it's 2025 and here we are. You already know why beam weapons are insane with statuses like electric. They double dip on status damage and status chance. And it also actually has an invisible status, which does count for galvanized shot, called microwave, I believe. That is what makes the enemies like body parts like grow weirdly with this gun. And it does count towards this mod, which is great, obviously. The average critical chance added from Enervate comes out to between 80 and 100%. So the weapon will, you know, be always critting. And then you get those occasional oranges, which are very, very strong with the 10.5 times multiplier. We are building it for viral and electric with a magnetic progenitor. Do remember that having magnetic allows us to, on either shield or overguard break, trigger an electric proc that will actually scale off of this electric mod and also enemy level. So the weapon just becomes even better at taking down those Eximus or, you know, any shielded units that are in a group, because you will spawn a like really, really buffed electric dot that will just nuke everything around it. You also obviously benefit from this weapon being a really good primer because you have a 150% status chance. So you will be capping viral, capping magnetic, and getting a ton of electricity on all of the enemies that you shoot. Our last utility weapon is one of the newer weapons added in the Isle Weaver update, and it is the Skytid, I don't know how to pronounce it, but the one reason you would use this one is because its alt fire is just a grouping ability. Like, yeah, this is just a weapon that is a grouping tool. That is, you know, like ridiculously strong. Being able to just have these alt fire and pull everything to a very tight group very quickly is better than some abilities in the game right now. This is all that you really need to run on it. At base, it only groups 8 enemies within 15 meters, but that 8 is actually multiplied by our multi-shot. So with a multi-shot of 10.8, we can group, I guess, I don't know, 80 enemies within 15 meters. Not that that will ever happen, but you know, you can still do it. The weapon can deal, you know, like some amount of damage. Like it's not the worst gun in the game, but you really only use it for this, which is why my showcase will be pairing it with Protea because she benefits the most from grouping like this. And yeah, it is just, you know, like it's really useful, man. I'm so happy that Araxia's secondary and melee are really good because it's been a while since we've had a like good signature frame weapon. DE kind of clicked with this one. Last but definitely not least, we have the dual coded Torxica. Now I do have the wrong progenitor. You definitely want to have magnetic on here, but these are a very similar weapon to the dual toxicist in Karnan, except obviously not in Karnan, but they have a unique trait where enemies damaged by it will spread spores that inflict cold and also cause the coded Torxica to deal 1.5 times more damage to them. It's a very, very simple weapon, but I honestly find, you know, these good weapons with a unique trait to actually be very powerful. Honestly, this one is the most, you know, debatable to include on the list in my opinion. There's a lot of other good secondaries in the game, so if you think that I should have swapped this out for something else, well, let me know. But I really like the Torxica. They're super fun, and this is the build that I use on them, focused around blast, just so you get that extra AoE. And in mission, you know, they're pretty damn good. That does round out my top 10 secondaries for Warframe in every category in 2025. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm cooking up a 40,000 word Valkyrie Perfected episode to release on the day of TennoCon. It's a lot of work, y'all, but I will see you all very soon. Peace.